Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Business Spotlight series. My name's Todd Rodden. I'm a certified business and executive coach. I own Aspire Action Coach located in the Dayton, Cincinnati, Ohio area. And today we have the honor to have Andy Loff join us. Andy is the founder and president of Axcess Infrastructure and really a leader in applying advanced materials into upgrades and enhancements within our key infrastructure across the U.S. And he'll talk more about that. But excited to have Andy join here with us, really a proven seasoned entrepreneur, having launched multiple businesses, as well as a personal friend of mine. So I'm honored to have him here to join us today. For those, if this is your first time viewing the Business Spotlight, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can not only receive this, but future drops that we have, as we have a series of these types of events, sharing lessons learned from business leaders across the U.S. and globally, if you're so inclined. So, Andy, welcome to the Spotlight. We're thrilled to have you here today. Maybe just take a couple minutes here, kind of talk about your background, maybe describe what Axcess is all about and how you got started.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Todd. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation. So my professional background has pretty much been in advanced materials solutions and infrastructure. My college degree originally was in composite materials engineering, and that spiraled into working for an R&D facility out of college, and then started my first company when I was 26 doing fabricating advanced materials solutions. And then that's evolved over time, grew that business, sold that business, and then started Axcess in 2020 to kind of continue that mission of advanced materials and infrastructure. And I've always been drawn to this entrepreneurial side. Both my parents owned their own businesses growing up, so this entrepreneurial world was kind of a comfort zone of mine growing up. So that kind of spurred me into this originally, but it's been a pretty big passion of mine. But now what we do now at Axcess is we do professional services. We design advanced material solutions in infrastructure, and that takes a lot of tangents, which we'll talk about in this, I'm sure. But that's kind of my nickel tour of my background.
So tell us about currently kind of your role in the business. You mentioned founder, president. What comes with that?
Yeah, so Axcess, was new startup in 2020. It was just me trying to push more advanced material solutions into infrastructure. And one of the limitations I had as a manufacturer is we were obviously pushing the solution we sold. Whereas now as Axcess is to be more of an owner advocate for these infrastructure solutions and helping the owners like DOTs, Army Corps of Engineers, people like that navigate the use of these materials and infrastructure. So, and started that in 2020. I mean, as a founder, that's your only employee, you basically do all of the functions. And I found in my entrepreneurial path, I like that startup phase the best. I like creating the businesses from nothing and then growing them to a point where, quite frankly, there are people better at running them and growing them in the next stage. And I think, for me, I've found that comfort zone that I like this front end part of the equation. So
what does your team look like now? Are you still primarily solo, or you have a growing team?
Yeah. So we have four employees right now on the professional services side. So we design these advanced materials solutions day in and day out for owners and also fabricators. On occasion we do some product development R&D work for end users, and we do quite a bit of consulting work helping people navigate how to use these advanced materials solutions in their applications. So a little bit more missionary work trying to educate people on, why they should use advanced materials and infrastructure, and, why in some cases they're better than steel, wood, or concrete, where they're not better. Basically helping owners make the right choices, with their infrastructure. So, it's a little easier now. The workload gets spread out a little bit more, than trying to do obviously everything yourself. But, a lot of my day still is doing the hardcore technical work, designing these solutions. A lot of my role now is a little bit more on the consulting side than the work product, helping people navigate where they should use it. And then some of our other team members, are into a little bit more of the detailed deliverables type design work.
Okay. You mentioned like some of your primary customers, things like DOTs and Army Corps of Engineer kind of groups. Maybe share with the audience like a couple typical type of applications for the services that you provide. I mean, you've got some great snapshots on your website, which we'll give that link later, but maybe you should share a few examples.
Yeah, so the Army Corps of Engineers is probably the easiest one to talk about. They make they control all our inland navigation waterways, for example, throughout the United States. So that's locks and dams and spillways, flood control, lots of really, really big infrastructure solutions. And, one of the changes in the, last 10 years, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act and the transportation bill that were recently passed by Congress, they mandated that designs be pushed out to designing these structures for 100 years, and also designing these structures to have a lower carbon footprint for their construction. Both of those things heavily weigh towards an advantage for advanced materials. It's kind of our wheelhouse thing. We last longer because we don't corrode as much, and we have less carbon footprint to construct these advanced material solutions. So, that spurred a lot of interest, for example, from the Army Corps. And, the types of structures we're working on for them are these, really big, traditionally steel fabrications that are, like Tainer gates for a spillway control dam. These are 50-foot, couple 100,000-pound steel structures that they're working to convert over to fiberglass. Things like miter gates at a lock and dam, the doors that move to control water in and out. So it runs the gamut. Basically, a lot of things that are made out of steel that have corrosion problems are places where these advanced materials fit. So that can also be bridges on the DOT side, fender protection systems that protect, say, bridge piers from a vessel running into a bridge pier on an inland navigation waterway. So, a lot of variety out there, but there's been a large push in the last 10 years to convert a lot of these traditional steel, wood, and concrete structures over to advanced materials. And there's just a very limited supply of design capability in the market for that. And that's, one of the things we're pioneering, is both doing the work, but also helping write a lot of the standards with these organizations like the Army Corps and, DOTs and things like that.
Okay, great examples there. So what's the one thing you wish more people knew about your business?
I think there's a lot of the materials themselves that we design about is one thing that, there's a lot of misconceptions between what plastic is, like the plastic toy that you get out of a vending machine that your kids might play with, versus, structural advanced composites that we're kind of talking about in this infrastructure realm. People have a hard time mentally differentiating what those are. And so when you say you're going to design, a bridge out of polymers, people get very nervous, even though when you get into the math and the design, it works really well. But trying to overcome that connotation can be typically fairly difficult. And also just from a competitive standpoint for us, getting that design work from owners can be a little challenging because they're used to contracting to, large design firms that have, thousands of employees. And, so for us, that can be a little bit of a challenge getting in the door to get, to win these kind of design contracts and to articulate this to owners.
Okay. We're kind of going deeper then on that, kind of making those contacts in terms of how you market the business and build that awareness. You talked about being an influencer and leading edge in terms of getting some of the, being part of writing the specifications, but what other channels of marketing and engagement have you found most effective? And, do you budget for that, or do you, hey, when you find an opportunity, you go at it one-off kind of way?
Yeah, so right now, it's been a lot of just reputation I've built over the last 20 years. So a lot of just word of mouth and person-to-person relationship building. And that's one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is how do we grow this from a 4-person to a 50-person or 100-person design firm. So I think the market exists to do that, but that now takes a marketing effort where you're marketing to people you don't know, and that's typically a little bit of a challenge for most professional services organizations face that, because when you hire a designer or even a lawyer or any kind of professional services, you want to know that person and have a recommendation for that. So trying to build out that marketing platform to grow the business larger is still something we're figuring out. But currently, a lot of just relationship, from the previous company I owned. I developed a lot of those relationships because it's in a similar industry. So, over that 20-year period, there are a lot of owners and things that we did projects for that, was able to contact, to start growing this business, relatively easily.
You talked about kind of that 20-year or so journey. If you look back on that time, what's been the most memorable roadblock that you had, the challenge that you had to overcome, and how did you do that, and what were some of your learnings?
Yeah, so when we started, the previous company I owned was named Composite Advantage, and we started that in 2005, and at that time there was very little of these types of structures in the market. So trying to get owners to buy what we were selling was a pretty significant challenge at the beginning, because we had to find people that were way on the front end of this early adoption curve that were willing to take some risks on us, and that took some significant effort to get some of those. And the big first win we did was making submarine bumpers for the U.S. Navy. And those are, these are 100,000-pound fiberglass structures that they park a $2.5 billion nuclear-powered submarine against. And, the Navy was willing to do this because they had kind of experimented with this through some of their R&D in the early 90s. And some of those structures they inspected 10, 15 years later, and they were performing really, really well. So, they were a little more willing to kind of take that leap. But then, once we were able to start marketing that and showing people what we were doing there, then, it got progressively easier. And over that time, we did, over from 2005 to 2020, we did, 500 different types of structures and applications across North America. So now, a lot of that groundwork we did at the previous company I own, is really, we're leveraging into trying to bring it a little bit more into a refined design process, so that, it can really penetrate the market like steel, wood, and concrete do. Instead of just selling kind of one-off solutions here or there. But that really laid the groundwork for this. But getting that first application, we kind of spun our wheels for 2+ years at the beginning of that, trying to get people to believe what we were saying, that this would work. Now it's a lot easier.
Well, you mentioned before, hey, so you're a small firm, sometimes competing against much larger engineering firms. So how do you position that way? And particularly, you have customers, the Navy in the past, and the DOT and the Army Corps, who probably are used to working with larger entities. So how do you position yourself against that?
So in a lot of cases, we've actually tried to not position ourselves against it as much as convincing those larger design firms to subcontract this type of specialty to us. So, for example, like the Army Corps has large IDIQ contracts with like large design firms like AECOM, who has 150,000 employees worldwide. And so they're able to direct award work to someone like AECOM for specific task orders or projects. And so what we do is try to position ourselves with the Army Corps people that, we are kind of the experts in this field. So, they and AECOM then subcontract some of that work to us. And so that's worked somewhat effectively, as a way to not, try to directly compete with those people. But, I think as the business grows, that is, a place where there will start to be more competition there. But, we're still trying to navigate that, to be quite honest. And every single one is, kind of a little bit different case by case application.
So you already talked a little bit about, hey, how you see the firm you have growing to 50 to 100 employees. And it just seems like, there's a obviously increased focus around infrastructure investments, some of the recent, bills through Congress and at the IRA and that. So what's your vision? What do you see 3 to 5 years from now in terms of scope of service or how your team looks?
Yeah, I mean, just as to your first point on the funding, there's the only time in our history we've spent more money on infrastructure was, right after World War II. There is a significant amount of infrastructure funding right now between the transportation bill and quite frankly, the Inflation Reduction Act, which, 50% of that money was actually for construction or infrastructure related projects. So, there is a significant amount of money in the infrastructure space right now, which has created a lot of challenges in the way that things are currently done right now. There aren't enough employees to execute that level of work. There's not enough equipment to execute that amount of work. There's not enough raw materials to execute that amount of work. And so advanced materials in general is in a really good spot because of some of what I talked about before, because of all this lack of employees and lack of equipment and lack of raw material, and the fact that you want to build these with lower carbon footprint, all stack up heavily in favor of advanced materials. Because one of the things that we can do on the advanced materials side is we're a lot lighter weight, and we can build a lot bigger components as a result. So we can do a lot more accelerated construction and actually lower a lot of the labor content that's in some of these projects. So not only do we last longer, we have lower carbon footprint. Those are great. We don't corrode in the kind of natural environment, but we can actually significantly reduce the labor content. So one example I use, an Army Corps Tainer gate. These are the gates that, just pivot up and down at a spillway dam. You've probably driven by them before. In those, if you buy a steel gate, about 70% of the cost of that is labor to build it. With the advanced, the composite solution to do the same thing, only about 15% of the cost of that is labor. And in absolute numbers, we're probably a fourth the amount of man hours to do the same thing. So even though the materials cost a little more, but the labor content is a lot less. So the installed cost ends up being pretty similar between a steel and an FRP solution, but you're using a lot less labor, of which there is not enough of to execute all of these projects. So I think, and that's where these agencies are seeing this too. And that's part of they all have pretty large pushes to, we need to really start thinking seriously about this composite stuff, this advanced materials solutions, because we know we have all these constraints. We can't just keep, hammering the same nail, because there's everyone is competing for these same resources. The Army Corps, building contractors, DOTs, utility line constructors, all of these people are all competing for these same resources that are funded at levels that haven't been seen in 90 years, 80 years.
Wow, great example. Anybody you talk to in construction industry, residential, commercial, big infrastructure, all struggling on the labor side. So a solution that not only is, green friendly, but also actually allows projects to get done that otherwise wouldn't.
Right.
That now carries over. So you're helping those businesses solve their labor challenge and getting those big projects done. How do you think about your team? You've talked about how you've had some growth. You have 4 employees now, but you see a path, or you desire a path to much larger. So how do you approach hiring and retaining team members? And like, you probably got some very special skills you're looking for potentially with some of your folks. So
I think there's the biggest constraint we have is this isn't a skill set that we do that I can just go hire. There aren't very many people that actually know how to design these types of things, and collectively we're the ones kind of writing the standards around these solutions in the industry. So no matter who we hire, there's a decent amount of learning curve that comes into this, because typically with professional engineers, they have some sort of specialty, like they typically design steel structures, or they typically design concrete structures or wood structures. So there's a pretty big investment in taking one of those people and then converting them over to learning the nuances of designing with advanced materials. So there's quite a bit of expense and time that goes into that process. So for us, it's more about finding those people that want to learn it, right? That want the challenge of doing something new. And that's not always the easiest for engineers. Engineers by nature kind of like their comfort zone. So, from screening tools and things like that, trying to get people that are interested in learning that, and also interested in driving something new into the market, that are kind of yes first people instead of no first people. Trying to find that is a challenge. I think we offer some compelling incentives to come over. I mean, one of the things that we do, we're primarily a virtual organization, and that's by design. I mean, I think my opinion, the world is kind of going that way. There are a lot of people that like the flexibility that comes with that. So, our business model is kind of built around that flexibility of being able to have more, time at home, being able to flex their time around, things like that. We don't force people into the office. And the other thing that allows us to do is, whether the employees are in Atlanta or Denver or Arkansas, it really doesn't matter to us. So, as a small firm, that kind of gives us the ability to try to find these people dispersed, throughout the United States. And the other thing with our world is we probably have more discretion on pay, than most areas, because it's not ultra competitive at this point where we need to try to drive rates down. So, some of that recruiting and things we can do through pay. But the bigger issue for us is probably not finding people. It's the time and expense to train them and get them, proficient at what we do. Because that's all an internal thing. And a lot of my time, frankly, of trying to train these people.
Okay. Well, speaking of your time, and you mentioned had the work-life flexibility, being virtual helps with finding the best talent. How do you manage your time? How do you manage work-life balance, being a founder, wearing so many hats, the ongoing pressures of the business? What are some of your keys there?
As a founder, I mean, one of the primary reasons that I record my time is so that I can monitor myself for the amount of hours that I work. I mean, I have a pretty hard cap that I will not average more than 40 hours a week. And people ask me that all the time. How do I do that? Well, I just stop working. And that comes with some consequences on the business side, but it comes with a lot of benefits on the at-home side. I mean, I have an 11, 9, and 7-year-old at home, and quite frankly, that's more important to me than the business. So eroding that time, I just don't do. And the thing that I've found over time, it makes you very efficient when you're actually working. There isn't a lot of side conversations here, and it's get done what you were going to get done that day and hurry up and do it. It's just always been a big priority of mine, especially since I had kids. I mean, it was probably a little more flexible with this before I had kids, and it may be again when my kids are moved out, but for now that's a huge priority, and quite frankly more important to me than the business.
So way to set your priorities and really stick and hold yourself accountable to it. So it's a very big deal to me. So before I ask the final question, what's the best way for folks to connect with you, to follow all the activities that you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, we have a LinkedIn page that's Axcess Infrastructure, a website that's axcessinfrastructure.com. Those are two good ways. One of the things we're trying to build out on our website right now is a lot of really good technical content on these advanced materials solutions. Lots of good photo galleries, things like that, to try to get people to understand, what it is we're even talking about with these advanced materials and infrastructure. But the best way is, through the website. And then, obviously we have a mailing list on there. If people are really interested, they can sign up for that.
So as we wrap here today, what is most inspiring to you today?
I'm pretty inspired, actually, being an infrastructure person, that our country actually invested a pretty significant amount of money in our infrastructure. I think that's been one of the keys to our growth since World War II. When you look at the deficiencies in other countries and their manufacturing base, a lot of that comes back to that infrastructure. And the fact that as a country we're willing to keep spending on that, I think puts us in a really good position going forward. And I may be biased because I work in this market, but to me, I think that's a pretty good thing, especially given our political climate's not always the best at getting things accomplished. that's one that we were actually able to do and get done. So.
Well, thank you, Andy, for sharing your story and also the story about Axcess Infrastructure. I want to thank the audience for joining us here today as well. Encourage you to follow Andy and Axcess through the LinkedIn as well as through their website, as he mentioned. They are extremely well positioned given some of the really the macro trends around infrastructure, and just personally knowing Andy. The vision he has, he's somebody who makes those things happen, is very committed. So you want to follow and see the wins that they have coming. So again, to the audience, we thank you for joining us today on the Business Spotlight. Again, encourage you to go out and view some of the other interviews that we have, but also importantly, subscribe so that you'll receive those automatically through the feed. So and thank you, and hope you all have a terrific day.